Good morning and welcome to the July 26th Special Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. And just before we go any further, I just want to say thank you to all of the members of the audience. It's great to have you here, and we often see a very quiet room, so you're such a welcome addition. Our clerk today is Ms. Sheila Gurry. Today's special Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. Members have been granted the authority to join meetings electronically. And Ms. Gurry, may I please ask us if there are any councillors on Zoom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think any members of council have yet to arrive electronically. So.
Okay, however, we do have quorum, so we can proceed?
You do, yes.
Thank you so much. So the first item on our agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have several late items this morning. Agenda item 5A1, BC Energy Step Code and Zero Carbon Step Code implementation. We're adding attachment D, which is industry email responses to proposed pathway. Agenda item 5A1, BC Energy Step Code and Zero Carbon Step Code implementation, adding correspondence from David Suzuki Foundation. We're also adding to the same agenda item the following delegations: Larry Whaley, Whelm King, Nina Rastogi, Bruni, and Angie Below. My apologies if I've mispronounced. And those delegations are in addition to those that are already on the agenda. And that's it, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Could I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended? So moved by Councillor Eastmore, seconded by Councillor Manley. All those in favor? No one's opposed? Thank you very much. We go on to reports. We'll start by asking Mr. Dale Lindsay, our General Manager of Development Services and Deputy CAO, if you could introduce the presentation for us.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair, Council. We're here this morning to introduce to the committee the recommendations for the BC Energy Step Code and Zero Carbon Step Code. And as Ms. Gurry's already mentioned, you have a number of delegations this morning who are wishing to speak to you on this matter. But before we get to delegations, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Pan, who's going to take a moment to walk you through the report and staff's recommendations around these matters. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Pan.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Pan. We'll leave it up to you. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and then Council. So I will provide a very high-level overview of the staff recommendation. And let's see, this works. Great. So there are two sets of regulations as part of the BC Building Code that help local governments to regulate building performance. They both apply to only just new construction, not existing buildings. And when I mention buildings, cities buildings in this presentation, I'm referring to the buildings in our community, not just the buildings that we own and operate. So these two sets of tools focus on different aspects of building performance. The Energy Step Code focuses on energy efficiency. Zero Carbon Step Code focuses on emissions reduction. So as of May 1st this year, all the applicable new buildings are required to achieve the 20% increase in energy efficiency. And the Zero Carbon Step Code was introduced for local governments to consider adoption. So this is what this report is about. So I'm gonna just do a bit of an explanation. BC Energy Step Code, this is where we are. So for Part 9 buildings, these are homes and small buildings. We're at Step 3. And for Part 3 buildings, these are large and complex buildings. We're at Step 2. The upper steps of the Energy Step Code are, gonna be implemented by the province before the end of 2027 and 2032. So these are the provincial timeline. And then Nanaimo has adopted a phased approach in implementing the lower steps of the Energy Step Code. Shortly after the Energy Step Code was introduced in 2018, we developed an implementation strategy. And the first move kind of came into effect in the spring of 2020. So for both Part 3 and Part 9 buildings, we achieved Step 1. And then in early 2021, for smaller buildings, it moved to Step 2. And then at the beginning of 2022, we're at basically the current level. And as for zero carbon step code, there are 4 levels. The first level is measure only. There's no reduction required. And then it moves up the tiers. So the highest tier is the emission level 4 and the zero carbon performance. Oops. Many types of buildings can be regulated under the zero carbon step code. These are fairly common building types and occupancies. Homes, smaller residential buildings, offices, apartments, condos, hotels, retail, and grocery stores. But there are also some complex and specific uses that are not regulated under this right now, such as recreation centers, hospitals, and restaurants. For smaller buildings, there are 2 ways to demonstrate compliance. One is a prescriptive pathway, so that focusing on looking at the kind of energy systems that your heating systems are connected to. So to achieve the moderate level, the applicants needs to demonstrate that they are connected, the space heating is connected to a zero carbon energy system, for example, electricity. And then for strong carbon level, then you need to demonstrate both the space and the hot water systems are connected to the zero carbon system. And the highest level, no fossil fuels are allowed. And the other pathway will be performance pathway. And so that is more looking at the buildings as a whole system, and you can make some choices and trade-offs. As long as you are under the maximum GHG emissions per home per year, then you can demonstrate your compliance. And also, I just want to add that the backup systems are not included in these calculations. We can still have, backup system on the energy systems, the energy sources that they choose. So the provincial timeline, this is where we are as of May 1st, 2023. Basically for the BC Energy Step Code, all the buildings will get to the top level, top steps by 2032, and then it will achieve the highest zero carbon performance level before 2030. So why a zero carbon step code is introduced? The Energy Step Code, because it is focusing mostly on energy efficiency, as a result, depending on the kind of energy systems that it was connected, you can still have quite a bit of emissions if it is connected and using conventional natural gas, whereas electric heating systems naturally emits a lot less emissions. And so even if you have not a very efficient system, you still have a much lower emissions overall. So why staff recommends a zero carbon performance level, the highest level? Well, the city has a very ambitious climate targets. We're trying to cut our emissions by more than half by 2030 in less than 7 years. Building accounts for almost a third of Nanaimo's emissions based on 2017 inventory. It is really challenging to achieve those targets as the city continues to grow rapidly. And it's very difficult to achieve net emissions if we continue to introduce and add new emissions through new construction faster than we can remove emissions from existing building stock. And the staff did some analysis of the buildings that we have permitted since the introduction of the Energy Step Code, so since April 2020. And we found that for Part 3 buildings, that there is a higher proportion of buildings that are achieving upper steps already, even in the absence of the requirements. And we think that there are a number of factors that contribute to that. One is that, council's directed the rezoning policies and our density bonusing, that providing incentives and encouraging new developments to either seek higher steps or connecting to low carbon systems. And the other factors is that BC Housing have a pretty high building standards already in place. And we're also hearing that CMHC, the Canadian Housing and Mortgage Corporation, offers a very generous financing mechanisms for especially rental housing development that incentivize higher step. So I think that's part of why we're seeing a higher proportion of large Par 3 buildings are achieving upper steps. And in contrast, we're not seeing a lot of the upper step being achieved among smaller homes because those mechanisms typically don't apply to smaller buildings. We also took a look at all the permitted buildings since the Energy Step Code was introduced, the kind of systems they're connected to. So for large complex buildings, the majority of the buildings are already using electric for space heating and hot water heating. Whereas for Part 9 buildings, the opposite is true. The majority of the homes and smaller buildings are still mainly using gas for space heating and hot water heating. And we have consultants working with us and provided the greenhouse gas emissions modeling for different policy scenarios. So what you're seeing here is the top blue lines. Those represent the baseline. So if we follow the provincial timeline that I mentioned earlier, that's where our emissions of the new floor areas will generate. And the green lines at the bottom represents an accelerated energy step code and a zero carbon step code. But you can see that the main thing that makes difference is accelerating the zero carbon step code. From a greenhouse gas emission perspective, the acceleration of the energy step code doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. They're mostly, when they're combined, they could provide additional benefits in terms of comfort and lower utility bills. And I will just walk you quickly through the engagement process. So we did a region-wide engagement with the RDN, Landsville, and Qualicum Beach. The engagement focused on over 150 building and development industry stakeholders, including professional associations, and mostly trying to assess the feasibility of the policy recommendation, understanding the implications of that. We got quite a bit of support from the Capital Regional District, City of Victoria, and Saanich sustainability staff. They did the engagement almost a year ago, and we look at some of the lessons learned, and they help us also refine our survey questions. The response rate and the scope of an engagement are very similar to the CRD engagement results. So we did an online workshop on May 9th, and we released the industry survey after that. We held a staff workshop of all the participating municipalities to identify any potential barriers or challenges on the staff level. We conducted a number of equity stakeholder interviews. So these are interviews primarily with social housing providers and funders. And then on May 26th, based on the feedback from that initial engagement, we had a draft policy pathway, and we shared that with stakeholders through email, and that was presented as option 2 in this report. And after that, we received about 30 email responses and providing comments on that initial draft policy direction. And we reviewed the feedback, and I went through quite a few iterations and revised the policy directions. And so what you're seeing today was the result of that work and the final recommendation from staff. What we heard through engagement is that there is a very strong support for emission reductions and energy efficiency improvement in general. The incremental step changes when we're implementing the lower step of the energy step codes proved to be very challenging for some, and it could be confusing. And then they're very quick changes. There is a desire for fewer changes, even if it means accelerating the timeline. And there is a strong desire for consistency among jurisdictions. And they also call for need for homeowner awareness and education, and especially the benefits of connecting low-carbon systems. And more specifically, later on that we heard feedback on these two sets of step codes. And on the zero carbon step code, there are concerns raised about grid capacity and power reliability. We didn't find that industry capacity or the cost is a major issue. Generally, builders and developers are capable of building all electric buildings. Energy step code, on this side, we're hearing that there are some challenges of reaching the top step by 2025, which is what we originally proposed, but we also heard that going to the next step sooner is possible. In terms of cost, we also heard that currently there is not a lot of financial incentive to help build to the top step. The consultants also did some cost analysis for us and reviewing the recent cost studies, both for the zero carbon step code and the energy step code. And what we found is that to get to the top level of the zero carbon step code, in terms of capital cost increase is fairly minimal. The utility cost really varies. It's mostly driven by the type of energy systems that we're connecting, and also the equipments, the fluctuating utility cost, as well as the overall efficiency of the homes. The cost of future retrofits, we also took a look, and it could be very significant. And as the committee and council are aware that this council has supported a lot of initiatives that helps homeowners to retrofit their buildings, and we're seeing good results, but it is still costing existing homeowners tens of thousands of dollars usually to complete those retrofits. And in terms of reaching the top step of the energy step code, the capital cost increase could potentially be higher. Some builders could build to this top level without a lot of capital cost increase, but many still find it pretty challenging. But one key benefit of improving efficiency is that could help lower the utility cost. And we also reviewed what other local governments have done in terms of implementing the step code. And as you're probably aware, that District of Saanich and City of Victoria are the first municipalities that adopted the zero carbon step code. So they have 3 sets of dates for implementation of different building types, spanning from November this year to November next year. And they are intending to follow the provincial timeline for implementing the energy step code. So what we're proposing is that introducing the measure-only level upon bylaw adoption, requiring all applicable Part 3 and Part 9 buildings to meet the measure-only level. And then by July 1st, 2024, requiring all applicable Part 3 and Part 9 buildings to meet the zero carbon performance level or the emission level 4. And by January 1st, 2026, requiring all applicable Part 3 buildings to meet the Step 3 of the Energy Step Code. So that's one step higher, but not the top step. The staff is trying to strike a balance between taking urgent climate action and minimizing the cost increase on new development, especially in housing, and take the opportunity to improve energy efficiency to help lower the energy bills and build more comfortable and resilient buildings, especially in the large buildings. If we receive council's direction, we plan to bring the building bylaw amendments as soon as possible. And we'll be looking partners such as educational institutions, construction associations, home builders associations, and other professional associations to provide support on education, training, and capacity building, and supporting contractors to get the skills necessary for the upcoming changes. We also intend to continue to educate homeowners and future homeowners on the benefits and the feasibility of using low carbon energy systems and equipment. We plan to review and update our own policies and guidelines if these are the changes that we are going to implement to make sure that we identify and remove potential policy barriers and support the change that we would like to see. The staff plans to monitor emissions reductions in new construction after the policy came into effect. and promote low carbon energy systems through incentives and education. We also plan to work with BC Hydro to conduct a grid capacity analysis to hopefully proactively identify potential issues and resolve them. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions about the report.
Before we go to our delegations, I'll ask if there are any questions of council.
Yeah.
Seeing none? One question? Yes, go.
Just in terms of the timing of implementation, looks like Victoria and Saanich had it spread out November for single-family homes, for a portion of the multifamily in July 2024, and then finally in the finish in November for the rest. I'm just curious in terms of moving them all to July, and also, in terms of, I think the province says 6 months since after the bylaw it can be implemented. Why not have single-family homes in November with the recommendation?
Councillor Gesselbrook, I missed that last part that you said as well.
Oh, and how come not have, say if we adopt in September, January, 6 months from that, do the single-family homes similar to what Saanich and Victoria are doing?
Ms. Pan?
Through the chair, I think that it really just comes down to a number of considerations. So one is that if council gave us directions in next council meeting, which will be end of August, and then it will take a few council meetings to pass that. So we're looking at 6 months after that. It will be probably early, like spring 2024. So that will probably be like 3-4 months before July 1st. And establishing a separate date so close together could be confusing. So I think that's just an administrative kind of process, but also giving homeowners or builders a bit more notice.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, Ms. Gurry, we have some correspondence.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. That just forms part of your agenda and package, so it's just there for information.
Okay. Thank you so much. We'll go on to delegations then, and we'll start with Mr. Mark. Oh, I'm so sorry if I mess up these names. It's Mr. Bernhardt. Is that correct? Great. We've given you 5 minutes. I'll give you a signal when you've got 1 minute to go, and there may be questions of council after you're done. Right. Raise that as high as you can. You're tall.
There goes that.
Good move.
Everybody
Good
sounds
move.
clear? All right.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. I'm Mark Bernhardt. I'm president of Bernhardt Contracting. I'm a licensed builder, certified energy advisor, and a developer. I'm also currently the vice president of the CHBA of BC, and I sit on the board locally. I do want to be clear that I'm not speaking with the voice of that association right now. I'm speaking as Mark Bernhardt and Bernhardt Contracting. Okay. And our team has been StepCode since before StepCode was called StepCode. We've been involved for a long time. And that's given us some opportunity to be involved early, so allowing us to have the time to do research. And we published several papers on the subject. And in particular with the zero carbon StepCode, I'll stick to that today because the city's not moving on the other stuff. So just specific to the zero carbon StepCode, I wanted to try and answer the question of how worried should builders be. So I've got some data to play with here. So I want to start with an example house. We call this the Herco residence. This is really an average Joe type house, even built by a guy named Joe. Could be built anywhere, relatively affordable, just a family style house. And if we look at where the homes in our company database lie as far as their GHG emissions, here we're looking at the total emissions for houses. And this is, we work provincially. We have an office in Kamloops and in the North Island as well. So this is a spread out data set of the province. If this was just Nanaimo, I'd expect it to be more skewed towards the green zone there where houses are using all electric systems. But if we take the code and we plot it on there and see where the different steps lie, it roughly lines up with all systems on gas, sort of one system on gas, and then no systems on gas. And if we take that average Joe house and we plot it there and we said, okay, well, if we do it, the worst possible construction we'd be legally allowed to do and run everything we possibly can on gas. It does fail, it does fall outside the moderate for the total emissions. However, there is that other metric, which is the intensity metric, the per square meter metric, and this house actually still does pass the moderate level on that metric with running everything on gas and doing the worst possible construction you can do. Now, this is not a sellable house. Nobody in Nanaimo would build this house because a client would never pay for it. It's really a low standard house, and it is still passing that first level. If we did that and we built that house to step 5, which is how it was actually constructed in real life, it does pass the moderate level. If we take it and all we do is we add a hybrid heating system, so this is a gas furnace with a heat pump attached to it, now we're getting up the scale some more. If we go to an electric hot water tank, still with a hybrid system, now we're into that 0 level. And so, I think there's some people here that would like to see a gas ban. This code is not a gas ban. You can still have a fair amount of gas use even at the highest level. So here we've got a house that could have fireplaces in every single room running full blast and all that sort of thing, and still be using a gas furnace a fair amount of the time, but is still reaching that 0 carbon level. So for most of our builder clients, and there's some of them in the room here today, this is a very common setup with an electric hot water tank and a hybrid heating system. It's a very, very status quo setup. Many are now figuring out that, well, the heat pump is good enough, the gas system is redundant, and we don't need that. So they're just dropping the gas side of it, and now we've got a more cost-effective system than what we were doing in the first place. So this is actually pushing us towards a cheaper option. So in terms of how worried should builders be, well, it's status quo for many, many people. This is not something that's really strict. It's not a gas ban. We're not cutting that pipe. And there still could be a fair amount of gas usage even at the top level. And then in terms of running costs, it is pushing us towards the running cost. This is going to come up again, I'm sure, with the Fortis presentation. And I don't want to get too buried in the weeds of the exact costs here, because there is some debate here, and it depends on how big your house is and whether or not you're using a lot of gas or not. But it's a really easy piece of math to do, right? It's the cost of the energy versus the efficiency of the system. If we're running a gas system, it's the cost of the energy.
1 minute.
Sure. And then, divided by the system. They're not that efficient of a system. If we go to a heat pump, it ends up being cheaper in most homes around here. Some examples from around here, 0 carbon systems that we've built. The Sixplex in particular is one of the older ones that we've done, and it continues to sell for top dollar. So this is good developer math. And some examples from around colder climates. If we can do it here, in these northern climates, we can do it anywhere. And I don't think there's a lot of reason to hold back in that. So that's all I have to say. Thanks for having me. And
Well, stay there. There may be some
Sure.
questions, okay? Council, any questions for Mr. Bernhardt? No? Seeing none? Well, it still doesn't want to work. There you are. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have you had a chance to look at the recommended motion?
I have, yes, I did. I was participating in the consultation, actually, that the staff did.
And if you were sitting at this table, how would you vote on it?
I would vote in favor
Question.
myself.
Sorry, it's probably unfair, but
Yeah, no, personally, I would vote in favor, and simply because it's really a status quo for most of our builders. What we're doing is changing it for the laggards, the ones that are really, really building that low style of construction. It's not going to affect the vast majority of builders at all. It will, on average, make things less expensive for homeowners, particularly in the running. And so in that way, you could also say, well, is it worth doing it all? Because what's the point? And there's maybe an argument there, but what it allows us to do when we're working in industry is have that conversation with clients to say, hey, look, the code is changing. We're starting to move this direction. Maybe this particular code doesn't get us all the way there, but we know it's coming. We know things are changing. And then we can have that conversation to say, okay, let's maybe future-proof ourselves and go a little bit further than might be necessary, and allows us to have that conversation. So for that reason alone, I would say it would be worth it.
And is it fair to say then, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, that the timetable as proposed is not unreasonable?
No, exactly. It's because it's status quo. And one of the reasons that Saanich and Victoria had it spread out like that is because there's a difference in lead time needed for the different types of houses. A single family home, relatively short. Those big towers, you're in zoning for a long time. And that was one of the reasons it was sort of staggered that way. You know, if it was implemented in a year, you know, or 6 months, I'm not sure there's a huge difference there, but certainly notice is a good idea. Enough time for us as we're working out there in industry to tell every single one of our clients as they come through that, look, this is changing. Your next house, you're going to have to do this or something like that. And that time is important. So if it was slowed down by 6 months, I don't think that's you know, a real problem.
And I wonder if you can comment, if I'm
Yes, thank
sure
you.
will indulge me. I wonder if you can comment on the kind of skill level, training, et cetera, that is required. I mean, if you're changing how you build and construct things, obviously you have to have people who can do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. So here on Vancouver Island, we're actually in a really good shape for trades like heat pump installers. You know, we've been installing air conditioning for a long time. I don't know that anybody in the right mind would build a house now without cooling of some kind. It's getting to be a life safety issue. So we have those trades, and there's more being trained all the time. VIU is doing a really good job of training more, and so there'll be more coming into the industry. So that sort of capacity doesn't seem to be a huge issue. Of course, we'd all love it to be cheaper. We'd all love them to like cut their rates and be a lot cheaper. You know, we could probably go on about that all day, but you know, I don't know that we're going to win that debate, and I don't think that's within council's rules.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Manley.
Not quite. Okay, there we go. Thank
So-
you. Thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate that. I have a question about the expectation of home buyers. Do your clients expect that buildings are going to be energy efficient when?
Absolutely, and in fact, if we look at the CHBA Nationals Homebuyer Survey, it used to always be that the walk-in closets were number one, that a must-have for new home buyers, and that's been that way since the dawn of time. Just recently, that bumped out of number one. And in the top 10, though, are, at least I believe last year was at least 5 of the items were to do with energy efficiency. It even beat out now, two-car garage actually dropped out of the top 10 because of that. And so yes, it's a key thing, and we also see a higher selling price as a result if the houses are that energy efficient, that low carbon. That is now a selling feature in the same way that granite countertops are.
Okay, and have you ever been involved in doing energy retrofits on older buildings?
Yes, actually, it's a significant portion of our business, we also calculate carbon and things like embodied carbon as well as a significant portion of our business. And you know, there is a tendency to say, well, like sort of have an us versus them argument. Should we do retrofits or should we do new builds? And I think that's a false argument. It's not us or them. It's both, and it's both right now. And you know, the trouble with retrofits is that they're so expensive to get any real result. And the unfortunate truth when we do the calculations on the carbon and the cost and all that is some of these houses, we should just let them live out their life and then tear them down and build something good, particularly something more dense. If we can take a single family house and put up a sixplex that is low carbon and highly efficient, that is much, much more sustainable than trying to put in a couple of new windows or, you know, not to say you should still swap out the oil furnace, like let's do that. Yeah. But it's hard to argue for a single family home retrofit. Larger buildings are a different story, but a single family home is tough.
Yeah, I've done 3 of them, so yeah. I know about the expense and the challenges. Well, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manley. Any other questions? Seeing that there are none, Mr. Bernhardt, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Second delegation is by Carmen LeBlanc. Hopefully I'm not messing that up, from Fortis, BC. Am I saying that right, Ms. LeBlanc? Yes. Good, thank you. Appreciate you being here. Thank you. You've got 5 minutes. And I'll let you know when we get to 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me here. I woke up this morning on the shores of beautiful Horn Lake in a regional district park, so it's nice to be here. This is a very important conversation. I'm happy to see all of the attendees here. And I've got some notes. I'm gonna work through them really quickly and hopefully not to speak too quickly, but we weren't included in the consultation process here. So I think that as a provider of energy to more than half the energy to British Columbians, the voice of energy users here in Nanaimo should be included in this conversation. So FortisBC shares the same vision as the City of Nanaimo for clean, affordable, and resilient energy future, and we actively support the efforts to reach BC and the City of Nanaimo's climate housing objectives. But the proposal presented to Council today does not support that vision and will have significant housing and affordability implications for residents and businesses in Nanaimo. As a company that delivers both gas and electricity, FortisBC is supportive of the increased level of efficiency required under the building code, but we cannot hastily accelerate such a transition. We advocate for a gradual adoption of the Zero Carbon Step Code, similar to the approach the City has taken to the adoption of the BC Energy Step Code. Significant acceleration of a 6-year implementation plan laid out by the province should not be condensed to just 8 months. Drawing from our experiences serving over 1 million homes and businesses across the province, we understand that the priorities of British Columbians extend beyond just climate action. They also value energy choice and affordability. To ensure our collective success in implementing the Zero Carbon Step Code, we're putting forward 4 key recommendations to support the gradual and achievable implementation. Our first recommendation is for the City to undertake a comprehensive consultation with a broad range of stakeholders so that the City can understand the implications and market readiness of these stakeholders, including energy providers. We have spoken to industry, and they have shared that they were not aware of the consultation and proposed Step Code implementation pathway. Attachment D was just shared yesterday, and I encourage you please to read the submissions that are included in that. It's crucial to consider the perspective of builders, homeowners, and developers to ensure that they have the flexibility to choose the most sustainable approaches for meeting Zero Carbon Step Code. If the City adopts the code too quickly, without allowing for alternative options, it will limit the community to a single energy source, resulting in potential cost increases and construction challenges that will, as well as reliability concerns. The second recommendation is that we allow time for the market education and adoption. A gradual and measured approach to adopting the Zero Carbon Step Code will ensure there is enough time for builders to understand, learn, and prepare for implementation. Going too fast, too soon, could result in great cost to the end user. How much of an uplift will it be to get builders to the next step? What training is required? These are great questions brought forward here today. 6 months of baseline may not even capture the majority of builders. FortisBC has solutions right now. We have the application in front of the BCUC that, if approved, will provide 100% renewable natural gas to all new residential buildings, resulting in emissions reductions even greater than the highest Zero Carbon Step Code level. I'm happy to see the recommendation and next steps to support low carbon energy, and our system does deliver that. We have received much support from the builder and developer community for this application, and we're asking the City of Nanaimo to consider supporting it as well. Thirdly, we need to consider the impacts to meet housing targets on new home construction that align with Premier David Eby and the province's Stronger BC plan. Consideration must be given to how Nanaimo's proposed Step Code pathway could negatively impact meeting housing targets. Attachment A references that options 1 and 2 will see significant delays in construction timelines. Our final recommendation is that we need to ensure there is significant energy to meet the requirements of the code. The electric and gas systems are designed to work together and should continue to do so to meet the energy needs of Nanaimo and the province as a whole. It's imperative to understand the capacity of renewable and low carbon gases, like renewable natural gas and hydrogen, as energies that do not put restraints on the system, but rather complement the electric system to ensure that even during the coldest days, residents and businesses have the energy they need. It's great to see BC Hydro here today too, because in the road to net zero and our ability to achieve it is going to take all of us sitting at the table working together. Lastly, once all of the above have been considered, there must be significant time to provided to conduct engagement that includes outreach to energy providers, stakeholders, associations, and businesses, most importantly, the residents of Nanaimo. As such, we're asking the board not to pursue options 1 and 2. This would accelerate 6 years into a few months. We're here to work with you on a measured approach whilst allowing British Columbians the option to choose how best to reduce their emissions in a way that's affordable and attainable. Thank you.
Okay, don't move. There may be some questions for you, and we'll start with Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
You mentioned that all new builds in Nanaimo could be powered with 100% renewable natural gas.
Yes.
Where would that renewable natural gas come from?
Yeah, we're working with producers across British Columbia. Right now we have producers that RNG is coming from landfill waste, organic, curbside organics, biomass, agriculture.
So if we were to be
Wastewater
producing
treatment?
renewable natural gas here in Nanaimo, how much could we produce from our landfill, from our organic waste site, from our sewage treatment plant? How many homes could we heat with that?
Yeah, our teams are working, actually. We've connected, our RNG team is working with the RDN staff to look at that.
And I'm curious about why we wouldn't just generate electricity on site from that methane that we're trying to capture, rather than working on piping it around the community.
Yeah, I think gas and electric sources of energy are really great at different things. Gas is really great and efficient at space and heating. Electricity is really great at lots of other things. And so the CRD actually is doing a Heartland Landfill RNG project that was previously generating electricity. And I think that decision, you can refer to them and their staff, but on a business and what is the energy capture at the end, the decision was made to go with transitioning from electricity to an RNG system there.
So
And I think there's all of those elements are taken into consideration, right? What's the volume of energy that we can, what's the economics of it?
Are you aware of the studies, the health studies, with the release of benzene, carcinogen into people's homes when they use natural gas for cooking, the release of nitrogen oxide, which is linked to asthma and COPD, that it's a health hazard to be burning gas in homes, and in fact, even without a gas stove, that some nitrogen oxide gets released into homes from furnaces and hot water tanks. Have you seen those studies?
For sure. There's lots of conversation about it. I'm happy to provide from our teams that are working on that too, the review of the studies and the summaries of studies that have been that are included in that conversation. I'm happy to follow up with information on that for sure.
So you're well aware of the health hazards?
I'm well aware of the conversation around it for sure.
Okay.
Are you done, Mr.
Thank you.
Councillor Manley? Thank you so much. Next speaker is Councillor Gesselbrook.
Thanks for the presentation. Yeah, there's just a lot of confusing things being said. There's statements saying about 100% renewable. You know, in the report, I think there was a Fortis commission report with the BC government. I mean, right now on the island, we're producing less than 1% from renewable sources. That's like from the landfills and from agriculture. It says they'll probably never get close to even like 2.2%, and you know, even 5%. So reaching that 100% from renewable natural gas isn't even in the scope of a reality. And so I'm curious how come that number is being used as 100%, because I feel that it is pretty misleading in the conversation, and one of the issues that we experience when speaking to the public about natural gas is that there's a lot of misconceptions.
Well, I'm happy to provide a follow-up report because in fact, there was a study done. My colleague here who is connected with the application before the BCUC, just to clarify the numbers, the application before the BCUC, what it would allow is the committed delivery of 100% RNG to a new residential meter. Right now, the program is elective, so you could attach to our system and choose 100% RNG today, and then choose none or a lower amount tomorrow. Then the application will see the creation of a new tariff that will attach for the life of that meter in that home 100% committed RNG to that. So that's the 100%. In fact, we did a commission study on the capacity and the ability for us to generate enough RNG within the province. And today our throughput through our gas system is about 220 petajoules of gas. And this study shows that the potential for RNG and low carbon gas production within the province of British Columbia is at least twice that. So I'm happy to provide that report to you.
Thank you. This is just perpetuating further of kind of the misconceptions. The report
I'll send you
does
the
say,
report,
I've got the report actually in front of me, and it says 400 petajoules. Of that, 10 petajoules comes from renewable natural gas as it maxed out. It says that in the report. The rest comes from blue-green hydrogen that's fracked, all these things, but how it's being communicated is that it's 100% renewable, which I find really misleading. And the other thing that came to my attention, what was a little frustrating, I gotta admit, is that there was this report that was commissioned by FortisBC, the province government was part of it, and there was actually recommendations and statements made by in the report that was released in the final draft. I'll read them out.
We'd like to ask for questions at this time.
Well, I'm getting to the question.
Okay, thanks.
The residential sector, alone, okay, here's the first quote. Air source heat pumps used in the climate of southern coastal BC, where most of the population is located, can achieve a coefficient of performance of 300% to 350% of that of the electricity used. This is 6 to 8 times more efficient than heating with gas. Then the report says the residential sector alone uses around 48 petajoules per year of natural gas for low temperature space heating. This need for low temperature heat can be met more effectively by pathways other than low carbon gas. Another quote, the goal of 15% renewable gas may be achieved more easily by switching technologies than by switching to low carbon gas. Another quote, a large share of BC's building stock will be replaced within the next 29 years between 2021 and 2050. This offers opportunities to switch from natural gas to alternative forms of heating. These were all actually statements made in the report. Which was surprising was that they were removed in a subsequent release in March. And I'm just curious what led to the decision to have these removed from a third-party independent report, because as a policy maker, that's pretty important information to have when I'm trying to decide whether to continue on, supporting natural gas or to switch to electric heating. And so my question is, what was behind the decision to remove that? Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know, and I'm happy to follow up internally and get an answer to that question. When we're looking at emissions reductions, it's about the carbon. So in our system, the study that shows the 400 petajoules of low carbon gas, renewable natural gas is a component of that. FortisBC owns and operates an energy delivery system, agnostic to the energy that's being delivered through it. Our capacity is to deliver energy to users across the province. The challenge, and as a both electric and gas utility, we have the benefit of looking at how these systems work together. So the challenge on our electric side in Fortis's, and I think we see around the province, is how are we going to generate and store and deliver the energy that we're going to need as we look to transitioning to the things we want, like EVs and air conditioning, space cooling. That's our electric system is looking at that. Our gas system is how do we decarbonize this? And to get to net zero, to support our energy needs, we need all the low carbon energy we can. Some of that in the gaseous form will come from renewable natural gas, from wastewater treatment and those items, and hydrogen will play a big part of that as we look to net zero, and Fortis spends a lot of time looking at this. It's not a straight pathway, it's all the energy tools together. And FortisBC and BC Hydro co-fund lots of programs to help with efficiency, realizing we need all the low carbon energy, and we also need to find ways to use less of it across the board. And those are programs that we fund together to help support our communities in doing that.
Councilor Estabrook, you done? You okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much, Chair, and perhaps an unfair question, but certainly the previous minister, responsible Minister Ralston, it appeared to me the government was certainly very supportive of hydrogen in the long haul. And in fairness, can you comment on how that you would see that being delivered? Is it going to be delivered through the same gas system we have now? as lots of people in Nanaimo do, use natural gas. And any lines built in the future would presumably be used the same way. Is that a fair comment?
There's tons of work being done on that right now, and in my community relations brains, when I get the privilege of sitting into these meetings, what I see is lots of combination. We were doing a pilot in our own facilities in the Lower Mainland to look at what's the proportion of blend of hydrogen that can be added to our current system to work in the piping and with the appliances at the end without impacting their ability to function. So we're looking at that. What's the blend of hydrogen that can be used without any change? And then isolated hydrogen systems are going to be a big piece. How is hydrogen going to support transportation? How is an isolated hydrogen system going to be able to support industry or a development? And all of those pieces are being considered. Yeah, so it's not all or nothing, just like this energy. It's not all the eggs in one basket, it's all the tools in the toolbox.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Krogh. If there are no other questions, thank you, Ms. LeBlanc. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Chair, I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Brown. Nice to have you here. You weren't here at the beginning of the meeting, so I wasn't aware that we had a member of council on Zoom. Thank you so much for being here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the delegation. Just picking up on His Worship's question there. There was no specifics provided, so I'm curious if your Fortis team believes they can get more than 10% hydrogen into existing structures, and then is there plans for an expected build out of standalone hydrogen infrastructure with respect to timelines and costs? Thank you.
Yeah, my continued invitation to the City of Nanaimo staff and council is to set the table for those conversations. So as they're happening, I'm happy on your request to find out how we can engage in that conversation together to share the information about the work that's being done every day with regard to hydrogen, for sure. Thank you for the question, and I'll follow up.
Councillor Brown, follow up.
Sorry. Yeah, no, specifically, does Fortis BC believe they can get more than 10% hydrogen into existing lines?
Yeah, as I'm not on the project team, I don't know that number, so I'm happy to follow up.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think specifics are important just when claims are made, especially by policymakers. So I would hope those answers will be forthcoming. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Thank you, Ms. LeBlanc. That's great. Thank you. Our next delegation speaker is Mr. Kyle. Oh, I'm gonna mess this up. Is it Jonkas? I'm saying that right? From Westmark Construction. Nice to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You've got 5 minutes, and I'll notify you at 1 minute.
Perfect. Is this the right height here? I'm not as tall, but
it is. No, that's great.
All right. Good morning, Your Worship, Council. Take a second here to do a quick land acknowledgement of the traditional territories of the Nanaimo people, the Nanaimo, First Nations people. Apologies.
Thank you.
So here to talk to you about the energy codes of the multi-unit residential buildings. For me, next slide, I suppose. My name is Kyle Jonkas. I am a part of Westmark Construction. I have a background in business as well as an architectural technologies diploma, and currently I'm a project coordinator for Westmark, but I have also been tasked with sustainability research and residential design, as that aligns with the background that I've come from as well. That being said, I'm going to take a little high level here as we've kind of gone over all the basics, but what I've done for Westmark is I proposed a bit of a document, a summary of metrics and direction for multi-unit residential and commercial construction. This has pretty much identified all of the major metrics and continued on to take some case study examples of the current projects that we are working on, and the output of that was that most of the performance metrics that we are achieving already are within the Step 3 code, and these are buildings that are going to be completed by late 2024. So, as a general contractor, this document's major goal is to develop understanding, but it's also to bridge the gap between trades and clients and provide an integrated communication, because as we kind of noted throughout the conversations today, I think that integration is really the missing piece, and leaving people out of the conversation is the issue. So I'm not going to jump down this train as we've got a little bit of conversation, but what we've basically done is when it comes to zero carbon and the timeline, we reached out to our subtrades and we asked them questions about it, how it would affect change and what the bottom lines would be. We got different varying conversations, from 5 to 10% increases for contractors in the mechanical world, for value engineering, sourcing complexity, fire safety, kind of bullet points, as well as electrical subtrades acknowledging that there's a big jump up for 600-volt distribution and small transmission changes in line and other things because of the heating loads, as well as EV chargers and other novel technologies. So the conversation continued, and with Energy Efficiency Code by January 2026, a little bit more halt, complexity, and confusion. A lot of reaction is just expensive, and complexity is a major concern with the energy efficiency changes. So from a general contractor point of view, we'd like to really take that into consideration, especially when our sub-trades are very concerned about it. But effectively, we've also reached out to other stakeholders, including the city of Nanaimo, and I had the chance to talk a little bit with David Stewart in the sustainability group, and we've realized that really what has come down to is a list of barriers to adoption would definitely need to be considered, and in line with the mid-rise MURB checklist from BC Design Guides, as well as methods to encourage participation, because it really does come down to an incentivized situation sometimes when it comes to producing new technology and new processes. So our goal for Westmark is to take a little bit of a leadership role within this and establish an integrated approach for adaptation to the changes that engages all parties and progress and benefit. And a little PowerPoint trick to show my point off here is we really should be a part of the conversation from the BC Design Guide all the way down. It's architects, developers, local governments, general contractors like us, sub-trades, and our clients and developers are really the big piece that we need to really assure that these costs continue and are consistent, because at the end of the day, we're talking about investment in Nanaimo and the region in general. So this is the pathway that we're going to be taking on. Right now, we're going to have a further development, the BC Design Guides, scope of potential changes, as well as the improvement types for the general checklist for MURB. These include a kind of high-level approach to the considerations from a design level, systems level, materials, and then even some GHG considerations. And these are all right out of the design guide. So taking these, we'd like to go towards more integrated discussions with our subtrades and with our developers and related stakeholders. And I will acknowledge this is a little bit behind on the jump, but we're trying to get a part of this conversation and really integrate ourselves to have a more forward and progressive approach. So finally, that also involves us kind of relating the research and the considerations that we come up with against the City of Nanaimo reports, because right now we're working with a number and assumption around a 0.1 to a 2.2% change in costs, or an increased range for us. And in general, that number feels a little bit possibly low, conservative, hopeful, but at the end of the day, working towards the proper number and the complexity being diminished and having more consistent understanding is all we would like to achieve. So between our research and design guide and these kind of numbers, we're going to kind of pare it down and really figure out what we can at least expect from our perspective. So everyone's favorite thing, a little bit of a request. I went through a bit of the notes, and not something we mentioned today, but I noticed there was a few kind of considerations being put out by the city. And so as a 35-year-old stakeholder in the Nanaimo region, it'd be really exciting for these discussed opportunities to be explored by the city of Nanaimo. We really do believe that it'd be favorable not only to attract development, but it also is favorable to align more progressive subtrades and to align change, incentivizing a progressive standpoint.
1 minute.
In general, I'll not go dive into these. I'll let council kind of take their thoughts, but rebates is a really good consideration that was put out there for the building permits, home energy evaluations, et cetera, encouraging the approach. The permit fast tracking for frontline status for anything in this regard as well. And I mean, as a multi-unit builder, we're going to be pro-density bonusing, but honestly, there is a lot of sustainable notion within that world. So to hit the point on the head, we are in favor of these changes, but the changes that are more considered with a little bit of a timeline. So the reason for this is that based on current practices and projects, Westmark is in reasonable scope to achieve these, as quickly demonstrated through our case studies. Honestly, they encourage an integrated conversation amongst all the stakeholders, which is really valuable moving forward, and I know that has been occurring, but a further version of that. And finally, really, I think maybe even from a personal standpoint, what this does is encourage valuable skill and knowledge developments for the region. This is something that getting ahead of the ball is maybe has some dangers in doing too quickly, but really the outcome is an advanced kind of systems and approach for building design. So thank you for your time.
Great.
That's the presentation.
Only a few seconds over. That was well done, and we'll see if there's any questions from council. Questions, councillor? Sorry, missed it. Thank you. I'm still getting the hang of it. It's one of those. Thank you. Councillor Manley to start.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. So what I'm gathering from the numbers that you had there, the actual increase in cost for energy efficiency standards is relatively negligible. Is that correct?
In our perspective, I think it comes down to it's a bidding and conversation and competition framework that happens within all of these cost associations. So for any one, it's achievable, but fitting it into the frameworks takes some time to understand better. So that I think it was 0 to 2.2% change. I'd say that's in flux as far as our perspective, maybe a little higher, but not necessarily outlandish to achieve after further consideration, I would say.
And do you do a lot of passive design for your construction?
Nothing of the current inventory that we are constructing is aligned with the passive designs. There are, I mean, in Vancouver, you're seeing a lot of those passive high rises and stuff start to take place. So I think the curb is coming, but I mean, we were one of the few cranes to go up recently in the city. So we're catching up to speed here in Nanaimo, I'd say.
Okay, well, I appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Manley. Councillor Gressbrook, I did see your name. Did you wish to? Okay. Thank you so much. There are no other questions.
Councillor Brown.
Oh, I'll get there. Sorry, Councillor Brown. Wish you were here. I wouldn't be able to reach you then. Thank you so much. One more question.
Not a problem, Chair. Yeah, quickly through you. First of all, thanks so much for the presentation, and I appreciate the effort made by the delegation and team to try to quantify some of that and dig deeper with the subtrades. My one question really is in respect to those recommendations. Do you have some examples from elsewhere that you operate in that framework has been put together nicely in the sense of incentives, faster permitting time, et cetera, to meet certain metrics or goals set by the municipality?
To better understand your question, you're saying the incentive framework, where has that applied before?
Yeah, can you point to examples, just out of my own curiosity, where that's being done well?
Yep. Honestly, those were all pulled straight from the report. Something that wasn't covered in the original kind of presentation of it, but those were options that were previously discussed and have been exemplified by the City of Richmond. Victoria, Saanich areas, I believe that every single one of them came with 3 or 4 examples of them being applied already. And I think it was even the City of Richmond is already applying like upwards of 50% reimbursement on building permits for buildings that achieve level 5 step code or even level 4. And I think there's kind of a varied output. So I don't have that top of head or written on my slide, unfortunately, but as far as I understand, these are all case examples straight from British Columbia.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Councillor Brown. If there are no other questions, thank you, Mr. Jonkis. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is on Zoom, I understand. Robin Webb, Tom Burkhout, Ted Onek. Oh, I hope I have Olenek. Sorry. Thank you so much from BC Hydro. Thank you and welcome. We have 5 minutes, and I'll notify you when there's 1 minute left.
All right, thanks so much. And good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Robin Webb, and I'm the Manager of Local Government Conservation and Climate Action with BC Hydro. I'm really pleased to be here today to talk a bit about how BC Hydro is preparing for electrification and the adoption of zero carbon step code across the province, and to provide a couple of updates from when I spoke to you earlier in the year. I wanted to start my presentation, though, by pointing to a really tangible example of how Hydro's partnership with the City of Nanaimo is working today. We actually provided a grant to the city to support the industry engagement process for the proposal you're considering today. So if we move to slide 2. So 98% of the power that BC Hydro generates comes from renewable resources. And we are a leader in clean electricity generation in North America, as you can see from this graph. Next slide. But for the bulk of my presentation, I really want to focus on the 2 questions that come up when people talk about electrification. So you'll just have to advance a couple here just until those come up. The first one is, do we have enough electricity? And the second one is, how will we keep the grid strong and reliable? So moving on to the next slide. As I mentioned when I spoke to you earlier in the year, and on to the next slide as well, we currently have a surplus of electricity, and in 2 years, Site C will come online, which will bring about 10% more to our current capacity. However, looking forward to the end of this decade, we are going to need more electricity as our customers are embracing electrification. So on to the next slide. You may have recently heard an announcement that BC Hydro and the province of BC made that we are planning to acquire more renewable electricity, and we're hoping that will come online in 2028. In this upcoming call for power, we're really seeking proposals for utility scale projects, and we anticipate that solar and wind would be the most cost-effective new generation options. So moving on to the next slide. But before we look at more supply, we're really wanting to do everything possible to actually reduce demand in the first place. I think I noted this last time I spoke with you, but without our energy efficiency efforts, overall power demand in BC would be about 10% higher than it is today. And moving forward, our plan is to invest even more heavily in these types of projects. So the next slide. So just changing gears a little bit, this is a map of of BC Hydro's large generation facilities in the north and the central and southern interior. If you move on to the next slide, there's about 80,000 kilometers of transmission lines that carry power from those places where it's generated to the load centers in the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island where it's needed. And that includes the transmission lines that bring power to the island. Currently, Vancouver Island generates about 4% of hydro's overall capacity, though. But I really wanted to bring some assurance to you today that we have both the energy resources and the grid capacity to serve electrification in Nanaimo. So if we move forward to the next slide, just to talk a little bit about what we're doing to keep that grid strong and reliable. So the next slide. There is currently a really high level of reliability performance in Nanaimo. On average, there's about one interruption or outage, that would be the more common term, per customer per year, which is about an hour in duration. But, you know, noting that climate impacts are affecting our system and that electrification really is driving growth. In 2022, we invested about $3.5 billion to upgrade both new transmission and distribution grid infrastructure. And this has been the largest
1 minute left.
Expansion of electrical infrastructure in the country. So the next slide. I just wanted to note, though, we want to be transparent about some of our challenges. And we do know at Hydro that we've had longer connection times than we should. We're connecting new buildings to our system. So we're working to create efficiencies and to tighten up our timelines. And we've also hired a number of new designers to reduce those connection timelines. And so the next slide. In conclusion, I just wanted to say that, you know, we really perceive that our energy system is changing for the better. And at Hydro, we're doing quite a lot of work behind the scenes to be ready for the energy transition. And that really includes working more closely with our municipal partners to deliver on your climate commitments. And as noted, we're happy to provide more information about the current state of the grid in Nanaimo and some of the work that we're doing piloting a new approach to planning our system that better integrates local government information into our long-term capital planning process. So thanks for giving us a chance today. And
hold on for some questions.
Yeah, myself and Tom and Ted are all happy.
Ms. Webb, okay. Are you up for some questions? Ms. Webb, are you ready to take some questions?
Yes, sorry. I was just going to say myself, Ted, and Tom are all... Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you, but it sounds like you're not hearing all of our discussion. Are you... Should we try? We'll try a question or two, okay? See if we can.
Yeah, no, I can hear. Yep.
Great. We'll start with Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much, Chair. You referred to a surplus of electricity at the present time. When you say surplus, do you mean as in the total production during the course of the year? Do you mean have we got a 10% surplus when we're at peak load, which happens, you know, winter and summer now with everybody using air conditioners, etc.? Could you explain that statement a little further, please?
Sure. Ted, do you want to field this one?
Sure. Thank you. Condolences, I can't be there. I'm actually stranded in Port Alberni as part of the road closure from Cameron Lake out to Fino last night, so I had to spend the night in my car in Port Alberni. So for the peak demand, we're a winter peaking facility or operation. We have to make sure we can meet the peak demand on the coldest day of the year. When all the lights are on, Christmas lights are on, TV's on, everything like that. And so that's when we meet our peak demand. It's during the winter time. Summer, we're able to meet the load in the summer, of course. Load is growing with air conditioning and cooling infrastructure being put in place for homes and for businesses. But it's the winter time. And so our surplus is there until 2030 to meet that coldest day of the year. That's when we talk about what our peak demand is. That's what we have to meet. Of course, everything drops down throughout the day at various times, but we want to make sure we have enough to meet that instantaneous demand on our system.
I'm sorry, but I didn't quite hear the answer to my question. Maybe it's the reverberation in my hearing and age and everything else, but in other words, you have surplus power available at peak demand based on the present supply. And is that power generated entirely within British Columbia, or does that require purchase, if you will, or transfer of power from other grids outside of the province?
So I understand. Go ahead, Robin.
No, it's okay. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there.
So we have the ability to meet the demand right now that's placed on the system. Is that the question,
Yes.
Mayor?
And within British Columbia, and
Yes,
without
yes.
having to purchase or transfer electricity from some other jurisdiction, we meet peak demand now.
Well, we're part of an integrated system. We are able to meet peak demand. We have the capacity to meet our peak demand right now. And with Site C coming online, we'll have that ability to further meet it until 2028, 2030. The idea, of course, though, is as part of the integrated system, we do purchase. I don't have the figures at what time we purchase, but we are part of the integrated system, as was seen in the earlier slide, where we do buy on the market sometimes, and we sell as well. I hope I'm addressing your question.
If
on average, in a year, BC Hydro will import about 3% of electricity that's used in the province from Alberta, which is one of our closest trading partners. But we are mostly a self-sufficient system.
Mostly self-sufficient.
We do a lot of trading.
Yes, and I understand a little bit about how the system works, and that's why I'm asking very specifically. Yeah. So is it fair for me to say, when we're at peak demand in the winter in this province, we cannot generate enough electricity within the boundaries of this province on our own to meet that peak demand? We in fact rely on electricity from other places.
That's your question.
Yes or no?
No, we are sufficient. Yes. We generate our own electricity. We have the capacity to meet our own electricity needs in the province, peak demand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Krogh. Next speaker is Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm curious about, what we have a surplus right now, and what is happening to that surplus? Is the capacity to provide electricity for the whole province? Is that how much of this capacity is dedicated to LNG or liquefied fracked gas exports for the new gas facilities coming online from Site C?
Sorry, I don't have the
sorry. So,
are we losing capacity to liquefied fracked gas export facilities? Is that where the capacity is going, or is it based on growth in the province?
I would say both. We are in need of new power because, as mentioned, our customers are really enthusiastic about electrification. So we're seeing growth in fuel switching, but we're also seeing really high growth patterns just in population growth and development patterns. And there is a high demand coming from the north from some of the LNG and mining facilities as well. So it's a combination. So we're not losing any capacity. There's just more demand. So we need to build more resources to meet the demand.
And we're reliant on cables crossing the Georgia Strait or the Salish Sea. And I'm just wondering what BC Hydro is doing to diversify and create a more distributive system here on Vancouver Island and in the Mid-Island region so that we can generate more of our power locally and create more power stability. Are there projects online here to do that, or incentives for power producers?
I can answer that. We generate about 40% of our power for Vancouver Island on Vancouver Island. Well, we provide 4% to the whole province infrastructure. We generate about 40% of our needs on the island, and the rest comes from the two cable systems. That's a pretty robust system for us. It's a very reliable system. Well, we did have some problems a few years ago with the heat dome on the 500 kV lines that go north by Nile Creek there. We rely on the cable system there. We do have the call for power, as Robin mentioned. We're looking at capacity where it can provide to a load center. Probably be more in the interior, I would imagine, with solar, with wind projects. But we could see a wind project coming from north of the island as well.
So we will see capacity building on Vancouver Island. Then is that what you're saying? There are plans for increased capacity?
There may be coming forward, but it's not a reliability. But it's not we don't have a reliability issue with the cables. The cables are designed, as I mentioned, we're part of the Western grid. So we have to meet some very strict standards to ensure reliability of N-1 in case there's any failures. So it's not a question of us not having the ability to meet our load on Vancouver Island.
Okay, thank you. That was just one of the concerns I saw from letters we received that there was concern about the line coming over to Vancouver or from the mainland. So I'm happy to hear that it's not a concern for BC Hydro. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manley.
No, it's not I know 20 years ago.
Councillor Gusselbrook?
If I could
just if you could finish quickly, thank you. Go ahead. Tom Burkhart, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, it was Ted. Ted,
oh,
you were
I'm
going to
sorry.
say.
Thank you.
Yes, it was just it was 20 years ago, we had some issues with the cables. They needed to be replaced. The cable system that went from Tsawwassen over to Duncan at VIT, the big substation, there was debate what we had to do there. And at that time, we looked at putting in a natural gas facility, as you recall, first in Port Alberni, then at Duke Point. And that was withdrawn, and we decided to go with, start electrification using our renewable resources to provide power. So we replaced the cables there. So that was the concern, and I know it's been raised a few times in conversations. Wasn't there some issue with cables? There was an issue 20 years ago with the cables. That's been remedied with the new cables that were put in place.
Thank you, Councillor Gusselbrook.
Great, thank you. My question is, there's pretty ambitious provincial targets in terms of electrification, and it's going to increase demand quite dramatically. And you've spoken a lot to that. I guess a lot of times when we're proposing these targets, as you said, there's always questions, we don't have enough electricity. I hear that around this council table actually quite often. Can you speak to, in terms of, obviously we're going to have to expand our infrastructure just like we always have done as our population grows and the demand, just as we'd have to do for any infrastructure. Are there any barriers to the expansion of our power system that are threatened feasibility? Or from the planning that's done now, is it well feasible that we could meet our energy needs provincially should we have the best case scenario in terms of electrification? And in that response, could you factor in sort of what the announcement about the Premier earlier on this year, what that means for that in terms of the request for energy proposals? Just, I've been hearing that spun that this is, fear that we're not going to have enough power. So if you could just speak to that, thank you.
Yeah, and so BC Hydro engages in a long-term planning process through our integrated resources plan. It's similar to a municipal OCP process in terms of it being long-term planning projections that you revisit at certain intervals. And our long-term planning process also has different scenarios. So in response to the call for power that came out recently, as noted, people in BC are embracing electrification, and we were seeing one of the high growth scenarios for electricity demand coming to fruition. So that's where we went and updated our integrated resource plan and accelerated this call for power 2 years sooner than what the previous plan had said, to ensure that we're able to bring new renewable electricity sources online sooner than what had been anticipated. And again, we're mandated by the BCUC to engage in that long-term planning process and provide updates to them on regular intervals too. So I guess there's that piece of the equation, but also I think the grid of the future is also going to look quite a bit different than the grid today too. We're starting to experiment with things like large-scale batteries and the deployment of those in various communities across the province. So there's also technology advancements that are going to help us meet some of our electrification goals. We're doing things around time of use rate that tries to shift a lot of demand out of that peak time and into other times of day. Tom and Ted, is there anything else you guys want to add? Things I didn't mention?
No, I think that's a sufficient answer. That's a good answer.
So just as a follow-up then, so really the call for power being 2 years earlier, would I be incorrect to characterize it, instead of being a cause for alarm, is more of a cause for celebration that BC is uptaking electrification and we are moving in the direction towards a more zero carbon future?
For sure, yeah, that's the way I would read into it. For sure, is that again, that high electrification scenarios coming to fruition is really exciting in our minds. And so, sorry, Tom, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, to me, that's how, like, I read it, that the system's working the way it's supposed to. We don't want to overbuild sooner than we need to, because then basically someone has to pay for that infrastructure while it sits there underused. And so it's, the planning is looking out, it's saying, oh, okay, it's actually electrification and other demand is growing a little bit quicker than we thought it was a couple of years ago. So we're going to issue a call now in advance so that power is online when it's required. And so I think, to me, it shows that it's working well as far as meeting. We don't, again, the whole point is not to overbuild, but to build as it's required and to be monitoring closely as we go forward. So I take that as a very positive sign.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gasselbrook. I can't see Councillor Brown is on the Zoom currently, Ms. Gurry?
He is on the Zoom, but he does not have his hand
Any
raised
questions?
for a question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much to the speakers from BC Hydro. We appreciate you being here, and we'll go on to our next speaker. Thank you. The next speaker is Carrie Ann Cody from the Canadian Home Builders Association, who I understand is also on Zoom.
That's correct.
Hi, Ms. Cody. Nice to have you here. Thank you so much. We give you 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when you're at 1 minute left.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start off. So good morning, Your Worship, Madam Chair and Council, and thank you for your time. At the beginning, I would just want to draw attention to, I guess, some thanks to the City of Nanaimo for the staff's recommendation to not accelerate the higher steps of the BC Energy Step Code at this time. This is going to allow for industry to be for more readiness, allow for more predictability, consistency, and to ensure economy of scale, and that it doesn't add additional costs for housing. So we're really appreciative of that. I think the majority of the conversation today, we're hearing about the zero carbon, but I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that we are very appreciative of that and all the work that was done on that. So moving on to the zero carbon part. what I just spoke about that measured and stepped approach, we would like to see happen with zero carbon. So for provincial zero carbon step code, we're supportive of the measure only aspect right now at level 1, but would like to see an allowance for more time before the implementation of emission level 4. We are aligned that moving towards a more energy efficient and zero carbon Nanaimo is our goal. I think we heard that from all of our speakers today, that is the ultimate goal. We're all looking very forward to when we get to net zero. We respectively ask, though, we take a measured and predictable path to get there and not condense this to under a year. This will allow the opportunity for a predictable transition to allow for renewable energy sources to get online. And the intent that we saw earlier in the presentation of the staggered carbon performance is that it's just that, it's staggered. These levels guide, the provincial levels guide to a reduction of carbon emissions in buildings, with the provincial scheduled to hit EL4 in 2030. So we would also recommend, earlier we saw in the presentation that the City of Nanaimo will work on a grid capacity analysis with BC Hydro. We would recommend that occur before a vote to advance to EL4 in 2024. The next aspect that I'd quickly like to talk about, because this is a more staggered approach and pushing out that EL4, this will ensure that there are no capacity issues within the City of Nanaimo, and we support this as a measured approach, and that it'd be more an evidence-based decision just driving change. We heard earlier that this is not a gas ban, but without the primary loads, I challenge that if the ROI would allow for infrastructure to be placed for those lifestyle and backup loads and capacity. So that's something that we talked about in Saanich and City of Victoria when they implemented this as well, that there may not be the availability to have the lifestyle loads, the backup loads, because the infrastructure won't be there. So that's something I think that's important to note. Concerns noted throughout the association from builders. So once this became public, builders called us to see what we were going to do about this. So concerns that were noted is that removing energy sources will remove choice in the market, creating the potential for less affordable home operation. And as I'm sure it's no secret to anybody here today, we are at a very high housing purchase price, high rental price. So we need to ensure that our operation costs are controlled and not to go too far out of line. And I think that was really relevant and evident in our CHBA National Home Buyers Preference, that 5, like Mark referenced earlier today, that 5 out of the 10 are on the top 10 are energy efficient related. And I think that's reflective of, with the cost of housing being so high, that people are really looking at how they spend their money and not wanting to spend it on the operation of the home.
1 minute left.
Absolutely, and not just because they don't want to, but in a lot of cases because they can't. I think I'll kind of end there, but we continue to welcome the City of Nanaimo and consulting with them to ensure that industry readiness is there, and that we will support consultation as well as homeowners and the education on that aspect.
Ms. Cody, thank you so much. There are questions for you if you're ready. Okay.
Absolutely.
We'll start with Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cody. Appreciate the presentation this morning. Just to be clear, have you had a chance, I assume, to see the recommended motion consisting of the 3 parts? And if you were, it's a question I asked earlier today, if you were at this table, you'd be voting in support of it? Yes or no?
No. So in part, I support the measure 1, going to measure only, so the EL1, but the recommendation that we are at the higher level by 2024, I am not supportive of that.
And what date would you recommend that you think is reasonable for industry to meet this?
I think what's reasonable is to follow the provincial timeline, and so at this point we're accelerating it by almost 6 years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Krogh. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ms. Cody, for the presentation. Are you aware that the federal government is changing the National Building Code and is encouraging the provinces to step up their game and move their step codes in quicker?
Certainly. So, so Step Code was a federal initiative, and that was why we created, well, we called it Step Code, but to get to net zero by 2030 was federal, and we responded by creating the Step Code. But the benefit to the Step Code is that it's incremental steps, and that there was time to prepare and to have industry readiness. And so I understand that the national code is going to do similar with the GHG side of things. But I guess so the ultimate goal, we're in aligned with. We're happy to see net zero come, but what we want is the predictability and the measured approach, and not condensing it to make it quicker.
And we already have some builders that are reaching these higher levels, and it seems like there's a number of them. We have a subsidized housing project here in Nanaimo called Nutsumat Leyland, which is a passive design building. I think it, from what I understand, it was maybe 5% more expensive to build. But now what we have, that the people living there aren't paying high energy bills, and so it's not an ongoing subsidy for taxpayers to continue to pay for energy servicing of this low-income housing. Do you think that that's the right approach to be taking in terms of how we spend taxpayer dollars for affordable housing and subsidized housing?
Absolutely, and I think also to echo what Westmark had discussed as well, incentivizing, I think that is the way to get here. Incentivizing, allow those leaders to continue to lead, build the high performance that they continue to build. And then we bring along the industry as time goes on, so it's measured and that sort of approach. But I agree with you that there's a tremendous amount of benefit to the operation costs being reduced.
And do the members of your association, do they hear from home buyers that energy efficiency is something that they expect in buildings, given that climate change has been on the public agenda for decades now, and people are well aware of it? Is that something home buyers expect from builders?
Certainly, it absolutely is, and I think it is something that we've talked about at all three levels of the association, that home labeling is going to be a lot more consumer recognized. I think, like, people don't buy cars anymore without looking at the fuel efficiency and things like that. So we're moving that direction with housing as well, that people are starting to understand what those blower door tests mean, what those metrics really will entail. But there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. I think the blanket statement that a home needs to be more energy efficient, certainly the majority, I would say all homeowners and renters understand. But I think that we still have some more work to do to really understand the metrics.
All right. Well, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you, Councillor Manley. Ms. Gurry, I can't see Councillor Brown. Is he on the web?
He is still online. He is just coming on when he has a question, so he's not there right now.
Okay, good. Seeing that there are no other questions, or?
Yeah, there's no other questions. So I was just, there is a recess scheduled for 10:30, Madam Chair. I would probably suggest we take that now. I think.
I'll just thank Ms. Cody. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate having you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So to our audience, I apologize, but because we are such a reduced council today, and we all have to be here, so we can't even leave the room for a couple of minutes without having a recess. So I do apologize, and if we could just take a reduced recess time, if we could be back within the next 5 to 7 minutes, I would really appreciate it. I don't want to lose the momentum, and we have several more speakers. start back in. If everyone would please take their seats. We have several more speakers to hear from. Looking forward to that. Thank you so much. If everyone could please take your seat. Our next speaker is Barbara McLennan. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Ms. McLennan?
No, it should be McClellan.
McClellan?
With two L's.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank
It's
you.
one of
You
those
pulled that right down.
difficult ethnic names.
Not at all. It's just perfect. Thank you so much for being here. And as you know, we give you 5 minutes, and I'll notify you when you know when there's 1 minute left.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. Thanks also to the city staff for their excellent report prepared for this meeting. And no, I didn't read the whole thing. I did read quite a bit of it. And I guess I could say, and now for something completely different, because everything that you've heard this morning so far has been from professionals, from people in the industry, and so on. I'm not a professional, and I can't pretend to have the depth of knowledge about some of these things. I'm an ordinary citizen and a taxpayer, and this is my perspective. I'm here today because I'm worried about the future, not my future so much. I'm 75, so my future is not looking
You have
too
decades
long.
left, decades.
But about the future of my children, my grandchildren, your future, at least some of you, and your children and grandchildren, indeed, of all children. In the words of eminent climatologist Katharine Hayhoe, the climate is changing, humans are responsible, the effects are serious, and the time to act is now. And every action counts. You can make a real difference right here, right now, by supporting the adoption of the Zero Carbon Step Code and implementing it quickly and decisively. Things are really more dire than Dr. Hayhoe's words would imply. Climate change is barreling down on us rapidly. Our planet is heating up and burning up at an alarming rate. The burning of fossil fuels by humans is the overriding cause, and the effects are catastrophic. It was a shock to learn that 619 people died in the 2021 heat dome. It was easy to miss at the time with so many other disasters unfolding: unprecedented heat, wildfires, high temperatures lit and burning to the ground, the November floods and landslides blocking the highways to the east, the destruction of farms and homes in the floods. The costs are in the billions, and we all pay. But 619 people, mostly old or with chronic health conditions or disabilities, and mostly living in poverty, paid with their lives. How have we let this happen? And just last week, 3 people involved in fighting fires died. Climate change kills, and the toll is even worse in some countries. We need to stop shuffling towards the solutions and get our skates on. The forest fires now raging in our province, the country, and the world are far worse to the heating and drying of our environment. Canada has already lost more forests this year than any other year previous, and BC is also breaking all records. These fires put tons of carbon into the atmosphere, and so the idea of putting yet more carbon into the atmosphere by burning gas of any kind while losing the trees that create the oxygen we need to live is insanity. Our first priority has to be doing everything we can to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in real terms. It makes no sense to delay, and it makes no sense to substitute one type of combustible for another. That's just a shell game. Real change is hard, but it's essential. We need to stop burning stuff: trees, wood pellets, coal, methane, oil, gas, or whatever. Preventing gas hookups in new construction is a good way to make this happen. I was particularly interested in the views of some of the business people surveyed in the staff report. Most have a good understanding of the changes we need, and most preferred certainty now over a long drawn out and possibly confusing change process. The report showed it makes sense for all municipalities to have the same standards, regulations, timelines, processes, etc. I would suggest your timelines are too long. I'm for accelerating. It's better to swallow the medicine quickly.
1 minute left.
And ensuring consistency means everyone is on a level playing field. My husband Glenn and I found the heat dome 2 years ago hard to handle, and so we decided to go for a heat pump. We chose a heat pump to replace the gas furnace to reduce our carbon emissions and get cooling as well as heating. Contrary to what some people told us, we find we spend less on energy now. After the first full year, we saved about $600. That will vary in different situations, but I think it's probably fairly typical. But it's easier to do it, to prevent it rather than have to retrofit. Does this mean that companies like Fortis and contractors and developers and others will have to move quickly to adapt? Yes, and if they must, they will, despite their protests. That's a business decision they have to make. So-called renewable gas is not a solution, nor is hydrogen. Both involve expensive, cumbersome processes that use a lot of, guess what? Electricity. Now that's what you call a Rube Goldberg machine.
If you could conclude, please.
Yeah. The staff report, as I say, was excellent, and I think you need to pay attention to that. In my view, solar is one of the best ways to augment our electrical supply, and it's cheap, and it's actually the cheapest way to produce electricity now.
If you could conclude.
Yep, so you can move us forward towards our carbon reduction targets with your decision. The time to act is now.
Thank you so much. Stay still. We'll see if there's any questions for you. Thank you. Any questions of council? And Councillor Brown is not on. Is he there? Did you have any questions?
He is here, but he has no questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your speaking, and we appreciate it.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Now, if we could refrain from applause, please. We'd like to have everyone feel that there's no perception about how one feels their opinion is valued at this table, and we appreciate that. So we'd like you to keep as quiet as possible. The next speaker is Mr. Larry Whaley. Mr. Whaley? Whaley. I'm gonna mispronounce every name. I'm just going to apologize right up front. Thank you, Mr. Whaley. We appreciate you being here. 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute left. Thank you.
Thank you. Whaley has 2 L's.
Thank you.
I'm here today on behalf of the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub. I emailed each of you a copy of my remarks, so I'll only hit the highlights. I won't read through it. The Nanaimo Climate Action Hub was formed in November of 2020. It has an active executive of 8 members and a membership of 82, a mailing list of 371, and 10 community partners. I think it's actually 12 now because we approved 2 more at our last meeting. We support the staff recommendation to move to zero carbon now. Our world is on fire. Our country is on fire. Our province is on fire. And our island is on fire. When you're faced with a fire, you don't add fuel. You don't delay. You don't say, well, I'll look at this for another however long and get around to turning off the tap, maybe sometime. You do it now. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much. Stay still. We'll see if there's any questions of council. Any questions? Councillor Brown has no questions. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Did I make the 5 minutes?
You made like 2 minutes. That was great. Thank you so much. And we'd prefer not to have any clapping. If you could refrain, please. Our next speaker is Whelm King. Thank you for being here. And you know the drill, 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when you're at a minute.
Thanks for having me, Council. In the 1930s and 40s, cigarette companies employed an army of doctors to tell you that if you claimed cigarettes were harmful, you were a quack. In fact, those doctors actively promoted cigarettes. In 1964, the US Surgeon General, for the first time, released a report based on 7,000 studies showing that cigarettes caused cancer, bronchitis, and a number of other diseases. 30 years later, 7 executives from the top American cigarette companies stood before the US Congress and said that the science was still unclear whether cigarettes were harmful. In the 1950s, the oil industry knew that fossil fuels was causing elevated carbon in our atmosphere. In the 1970s, their internal documents, now available publicly, claimed to know about the so-called greenhouse effect and that it was causing potentially catastrophic events in the near future. However, in 1989, those same companies formed the Global Climate Coalition, to oppose mandatory reductions in carbon emissions by obscuring scientific facts and clouding public understanding, saying that, quote, the role of greenhouse gas in climate change is still not well understood. This month is going to be the hottest July humanity has ever experienced. June this year was the hottest June humanity has ever experienced. Parts of the ocean right now are 5 degrees hotter than they are on average. Heat waves are rampant. Much of Europe is on fire. Canada is on fire. During an average wildfire season, about 24,000 square kilometers of Canada burns. Thus far this year, more than 4 times that amount has burned, and we're not halfway through. There is no scientific confusion around what is causing the climate crisis. The main culprit is fossil fuels. So what about this latest attempt by the gas industry to greenwash their way into some ongoing use, the so-called renewable natural gas? Let's be clear what this is and what this isn't. This is not Fortis and the natural gas industry trying to do the right thing. This is a desperate attempt of a highly polluting industry to try to stay relevant and stave off the inevitable, their overdue end. You can see it in the presentation as it was given today by the Fortis representative. When they know they can't win, what do these industries do? They try to stall. What does that mean? Let's not do it now, let's do it 6 years from now. And how do they frame it? It's not science, it's not fact, it's a conversation. We heard it multiple times from the representative today. This is not about facts, this is still a conversation, it's not a conversation. Renewable natural gas, which is recapturing methane, can theoretically help. But in the foreseeable future, this will be a tiny component of the LNG that is piped to Nanaimo and BC households. It is a drop in the bucket. A study came out this year, put out by Harvard, Duke, and NASA, showing that even tiny, minuscule leakages from the production, transmission, and use of natural gas makes natural gas as harmful to our climate as coal. This has been the talking point for natural gas for years. We're bad, but we're not as bad as coal. It takes the tiniest leakage, and leakages happen all the time, and liquid natural gas is as bad as coal. Renewable natural gas, as it stands today, is pure greenwashing. I've lived in BC my whole life. I've lived in Nanaimo for the last 20 years. I voted for every member of this council that I am currently looking at. I voted for you to take action like this. This is the action Nanaimo needs. The climate crisis is here now. It is only going to get worse. How bad it gets is up to decisions like this. Don't let the industry propagandists succeed in their continued tradition of lies and information. The same person we heard talking today, the same people who are promoting LNG decades ago would have been telling you cigarettes are not harmful. Climate change is a myth. Climate change is not tied to fossil fuels. Don't believe it. Nanaimo was a leader in adopting the Donut Economics Framework. Big congratulations. Please follow Victoria and Saanich in being a leader on this issue too. Thank you.
Excellent timing, excellent timing. Okay, we'll just see if there are any questions. I'd ask that please people do not clap. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but we'd prefer to have it as unemotional as possible. We'll see if there's any questions for you of council. Seeing that there's none, thank you, Mr. King. We appreciate you being here. Our next speaker is, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna mess this up. It's Nina Rastoga?
Rastogi.
Rastogi, it's beautiful, and I messed it up. I'm so sorry. Thank you for being here. 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute left. Thank you.
Respected Mayor, councilors, elders. In 2003, I completed my master's thesis in a field of human development. The body of psychology I used was eco-psychology. Psychological health is enjoyed by living within Earth's ecological limits. After finishing my master's thesis on living as if the world mattered, profiles of people choosing to live simply and responsibly, I had an epiphany. What we needed to avert catastrophe was to make sustainability cool. I applaud you, Mayor and City Council, for beginning the foundations of such coolness. Through your adopting the donut economics model and through your active transportation initiatives, which are currently growing spaces for people to walk or cycle, with greater confidence, this shift is becoming visible. But in these past weeks, Earth has experienced the hottest days, week, and month in 120,000 years. This is traumatizing. Obviously, more steps are needed. Mother Nature's delicate balance, our support system, is failing. Canada emits more GHGs per person than any other country in the world. So I applaud the city's proposal to take quick and definitive action that will down emissions of greenhouse gases here, not just through carbon credits, but on the ground in Nanaimo. I believe, as a former substitute teacher in Nanaimo schools for over 20 years, who encouraged discussion and songs about our planet's health and trends worldwide, that youth here will be relieved that changes are bringing zero carbon steps. They can see, touch, visit, live in. I believe the Zero Carbon Step Code will give youth, children, new parents, grandparents, and all who love kids or nature a bit of hope, or to tangibly hold on to. Hope is likely at the top of our list of valued commodities worldwide now. We humbly owe it to all of humanity to deliver. So again, I thank you, Mayor and Council. I believe through your considering the city's proposal, people in Nanaimo will gain greater hope. So will people in India, where my father was from. There, more and more days are reaching temperatures at which humans can no longer survive, even in the shade, outdoors, at rest. It is the most populated country in the world. Many of us in Nanaimo have family there, and your actions will be known of. Hope gives us new energy, joy, clarity of mind, endurance, motivation to collaborate, appreciation and love, courage to try new things, courage to speak up. When we take significant steps forward and feel hope, amazing things can happen. By looking outside the box, we discover intriguing, yes, cool ways to live, many costing less, many giving more hope and satisfaction. My 80-year-old mother from Holland, I grew up on stories of World War II, on managing with less. You can't eat money or gold, but grow a garden, pick food, pick blackberries, really. Yes. Yet my appeal to you today to not allow natural gas offset by carbon credits to steal its way into new homes and new buildings, bringing health hazards, heat and fire, comes not only from my concern for Nanaimo's youth and Nanaimo's need for hope. People and trillions of plants and animals are dying worldwide. So my plea comes from what I have seen and know from not just here, but beyond Canada's borders. This is a global problem. We are truly blessed to live here. What we do here impacts the whole world and brings positive or negative repercussions back here.
1 minute.
All time is up. We must build a new way that aligns with valuing all life to reduce our impacts. We must all, cities, businesses, and people, do all we can so that our joint efforts make the biggest dent tomorrow and today. My Dutch heart loves the protected active transportation paths. Thank you. My Indian brain says, we are standing at the doorway of economics as if the world matters. Yes to passive solar and hydro-powered heat pumps. Stop burning us up. Let's all continue taking steps forward. May our land be gently handled from now on. or pass it along. May the land be gently handled from now on. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Stay there. There might be some questions for you. Thank you so much. Council questions? There are none. Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you very much. And our next speaker is Bruni. Nice to have you back here. Pull that microphone down just a bit so we can hear you. Thank you so much. You know the routine, 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's a minute left.
Good morning, Mayor Krogh and honorable councillors. Some time ago, the council has declared a climate emergency. Are we there yet? Every day, species are dying. There's tornadoes, earthquakes, fires, more than we have ever seen before, and high temperatures. More and more people are dying of cancer. I wonder why. Could it be because we're poisoning the air? Anyone with any common sense today must realize that we can't keep digging holes in the earth on and on and on and on for years and years and years, and that it's okay. It's not okay. The earth doesn't belong to us. We're just going through here. We've got to stop our destructive ways. I can stand on a street and wave a sign and not be able to make a difference, but you can. You have the power and the authority to make a better plan, a plan that's sustainable. Gases are really, really destructive. They're inflammable. Gas fire, you just can't stop. It goes on and on. We need to stop that. We can do a better way. Electricity is a clean, good energy. So maybe we don't have electricity for everyone to have an electric car. Well, you know what? We just need to learn to consume less because we're destroying this beautiful planet that is our home. And I don't want to go to the moon. Do you? Do you want your child to go to the moon? We cannot replace this planet, and we need to change. How about solar added to our electricity on every housing project? The invitation for solar energy now is incredible. Rooftop gardens for affordable food. How about that? The people of Nanaimo have trusted you to care for them and not put poison gases into their home where they think they're safe. There should be no question this time of putting gas in a house. No question at all. I ask you to do the right thing and say no to all gases forever, period. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much for being here. I see no questions. We'll go on to our final speaker. Thank you so much. Our final speaker is Angie Boileau. Am I close? Am I even close? How is it pronounced? Boileau.
Yeah.
Boileau? Okay, thank you so much. And you know the routine, 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's 1 minute left. Thank you.
Alrighty, well, good morning, Madam Chair, Mayor Krogh, council members. My name is Angie Boileau. I'm a professional engineer and an energy analyst at Focal Engineering. I've been living and working in Nanaimo as a mechanical engineer for the past 7 years, and I'm here today to acknowledge my support for this building bylaw. As a professional in the industry, as well as the parent of a young child, I think that this change is important and achievable. Our firm provides energy modeling services to buildings to inform design decisions as well as achieve STEP code compliance. So for the past 5 years, we've been working with the BC Energy STEP code on buildings to achieve a lot. We've been working on a number of buildings that have achieved Step 3 and Step 4 of the BC Energy STEP code. These buildings have been in Nanaimo and other communities within the same climate zone. What this has shown us, and what we know from our experience, is that for a variety of buildings with modern technology, as well as design strategies implemented, these targets are both achievable and reasonable. I see this as an opportunity to enhance future developments in our city, as well as come in line with our 2030 and 2050 emissions targets. I think this is an important step in that direction, and it also places Nanaimo as a leader in implementing energy policy within our province. On behalf of Focal Engineering, I applaud the efforts of the City of Nanaimo in putting this together, and would like to provide my support and express my support for this bylaw amendment. So thank you for your consideration and your time.
Thank you so much. I'll see if there's any questions, and seeing none, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Gurry. Is there anything else before I ask council for their wish?
No, Madam Chair, you are on to the proposed recommendation and discussion.
Thank you so much. Wish of council? Councillor Manley.
I'd like to move the proposed recommendation.
Thank you. Is there seconders? Councillor Gesslerbrook to second the motion. Councillor Manley, does you wish to speak to it?
Sure. I became an active citizen when I was a teenager, concerned about environmental issues. Some people use the term activist. I'm happy to wear that badge. I became a climate activist when I met David Suzuki in 1989. And read his book, A Matter of Survival. Many of those things that were predicted in that book we're seeing unfold today. I heard a climate scientist last week say that this is the warmest summer of our lives and the coolest summer of the rest of our lives. We're in trouble. And we're in serious trouble. We should have been on this decades ago. And we're in feedback loops now. We're seeing our forests burn. We're seeing drought like never before. Those forests are adding carbon to our atmosphere. We're seeing the northern part of Canada see heat that it's never seen before. We're seeing the permafrost melting and releasing methane into the atmosphere. We're going into a serious feedback loop. I have done 3 home energy retrofits. They were not easy things to do, but I did them because they were the right thing to do. I built out walls in my basements and, took 0 insulation in one old 1910 home that had an energy efficiency rating of 40% and turned that home into an Energy Star with an 80% rating. Installed a heat pump 18 years ago. It still has a gas furnace in it, but it's only there for backup. And that heat pump is humming along perfectly now. And it hasn't had any major cost added to it. It's quiet and does the job perfectly. The home I live in now had all gas appliances when I moved in, gas stove, gas furnace, gas hot water. It is now a 0 emission building. I removed the paneling in the basement, built out the walls so I could put in R24 insulation and properly insulate the basement. But the upstairs, trying to knock out lath and plaster and rebuild walls so you can put proper insulation in is very expensive. The time to make a building energy efficient is when you're building it. And there is no need in this day and age to be burning fracked gas in our homes. None at all. I have a heat pump that is rated for minus 25 degrees. I have solar panels on my roof that are providing energy from my home. And I can look my children and my grandchildren in the eye and say that I've done what I could. And I will continue to do what I can. And so I have no problem at all supporting this. I've heard from industry specialists today in the building profession say that this can be done, that they want certainty, and that this will give them certainty. And as we see municipalities on Vancouver Island adopting these new standards and codes, we will see at least Vancouver Island-wide and hopefully provincially wide standards for builders and developers to adhere to. And the time is now. We've lost far too much time talking about this being too expensive. We're talking about this not being enough, and that so many other factors are beyond our control. Canadians represent less than 0.5% of the population on the planet, but we generate 1.6% of greenhouse gas emissions. We are a major emitter on a per capita basis. Not number one, we're number 14. We're behind a few other countries, but we're well ahead of countries like China or India or other places.
I think if you could conclude, please.
Yeah, so I'm happy to support this. I would be happy to see no more natural gas connectors in our community. It's 80 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, and it leaks in every aspect all the way down the line. People turning on their gas stove, they're releasing methane into the atmosphere, and it's a climate killer. So I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manley. Next speaker is Councillor Gesselbrook and then Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Chair. The big picture of this policy is that Council has been working hard the last while to align our goals for greenhouse gas emissions with the internationally accepted targets to keep warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. There's been a lot of work on that, and basically at that point of warming, there are catastrophic changes to climate, which has huge impacts on functioning of everything. This has been a discussion that's been along for a long time. I think in 2010, Council set a target to be 30% below their 2010 or 2005 levels by 2020. And when we hit 2020, we were actually 18% higher. Of course, there's population growth, but a large reason why is that during that period, there was aggressive adoption of natural gas in homes, which increased our emissions. When we're hearing about the forest fires and the lack of action, the lack of change, you feel kind of helpless. We're a small town. We're a blip in the larger bucket. But I think there's two ways to approach the larger scale calamity. There's denial of what's going down, and we see a lot of that, and it's a very deal with it. And then the other way is trying to find hope and take action. And the measures that we're proposing here, wind was kind of taken out of my sails, one of the presenters, that this is kind of status quo. And really, we're not asking a whole lot doing this. It's feasible. There are maybe a little bit added costs in some areas, but this is not wild something new. This is something that's pretty feasible, and we probably could have implemented it 4 years ago if we had a bit stronger of a can-do attitude, and I think buy into this. When we have industry coming to speak, it's very complex building, and there's a lot of costs involved. We have affordability crisis, and these are all valid issues, and we do have to take the actual practical considerations into effect. It's like, do we have the people, the money, and the ability to actually change at this rate? The fact of the matter is that we actually do have to change at this rate, and for a rich country that has the resources that we have, if we can't do it, what does it send to the rest of the world? Our emission reduction that we accomplish here isn't going to change the direction of the ship, but we can either be a positive story to add to hope or a negative one. And I think a lot of people are looking towards Nanaimo. I think we're on the map. I think people look at Victoria and Saanich of what is possible and what can we do? And it causes a domino effect. And those stories are powerful. It gets other people on board in British Columbia, and then British Columbia, the rest of Canada, and then Canada can be a positive story. And it's all a collective effort. And we've got a great community here. I've got no doubt that our building community can rise to this challenge and meet these targets. And if we can't, the city's here to support, and everybody's here to support. But I think that as a whole, on all fronts, homelessness, climate action, we need to develop a mission focus as a community, a can-do attitude, and really accept the facts as they are and look how we can change it. There's a lot of reasons why not to do something and the challenges. And I know for a fact when I start getting focused on the barriers of things, it's pretty debilitating. But just for pure mental health reasons alone, we just got to focus on the can-do. And I've got a list of things of like why implementing this policy is feasible. The numbers are out now. Like 4 years ago, maybe a bit more debate, but like most likely the multifamily buildings and even single-family homes are going to save money in the long run doing this switch. The restrictions are just going to get tighter as the province implements more regulations on having zero carbon. And so if you put a natural gas system in your home now, you could be looking at a costly retrofit down the road. It's just not worth it. And when you look at the heat dome and the fact that you put in a heat pump system, you get an air conditioning system as well, that's a pretty big saving. I wish I'd done it a while ago, because the last couple of heat domes with an 11-month-old at home, when my wife was pregnant last year, it was brutal. And I was kicking myself for not putting a heat pump in. I think there's still a lot more people to put on board, and I do think we need to, there is some resistance to change, and I think a lot of it is fueled by misinformation. I think that we need to just start really focusing on the facts and having open debate on numbers, so that we can really look at what the possibility is. Because of the energy efficiency, because this is going to help us reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, it's not going to be the silver bullet. It's one part of a much larger puzzle. We should be doing this, and I think staff have done a lot of engagement on this, and yes, we've heard from some members of the building development community and that about the pacing of things. We've actually done a lot of compromises. We recognize when you look at, there's the step code, the energy step code, and the zero carbon step code. The step code really says use whatever heating system that you want, but just make your house more efficient. And we know that alone is not going to reach our targets. You can have a very insulated home, but still be running natural gas, and your emissions are going to be high. What really is going to get us there is the fuel switching. Our consultant has said it. It's very clear the facts are that we have to fuel switch. So we've compromised in this in the staff recommendations that we're not going to mandate the highest level of step code, because there are actual costs and building costs involved in that, and it will affect the bottom line. We can accept that. I think that for tenants and renters and long-term utility bills, you want your home efficient and it's better for the user. But the upfront capital costs, okay, we'll compromise on that, but let's fuel switch. And that's why we need to implement this as soon as possible. I think we could probably do it within the 6-month period and be totally fine. But I accept, staff's assessment and engagement with the building community. So I think we just need to get it done and move on, because there's a lot larger fish to fry than this one. And we've got the capacity in town here, and for what we don't have, we're going to build it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to everyone that presented and also, I think expressed themselves. We did receive quite a few emails with a variety of opinions. And also, I think thanks to staff for their work on this and the report today. I will be supporting the motion on the floor, which is staff recommendations. And I'll keep my reasons short. But essentially, we have proven building technology with proven backends, with, in particular, the electrical grid and BC Hydro that can supply these types of transitions. These transitions are necessary. I think Hydro is unfairly asked questions and criticized more than other energy providers whether they can meet this transition, and they have a proven track record in this province of doing really excellent work and are very upfront and honest when asked questions about the long-term supply. And to me, that's important, bringing honesty to the conversation, because when you bring honesty, that allows for problem identification and then working towards solutions. And so when I weigh out all the context of that, I appreciate the approach, allowing time for certain elements of the building industry to catch up to where we're going. there is a reality there, and I think the recommendations staff have put forward clearly align with where we need to go and the vision to get there, while also being pragmatic with respect to a little bit of work that needs to be done. So all in all, I think a great report, great recommendation. It doesn't demand too much of people, and I know that we can implement this on a timeline, on an expedited timeline. So highly supportive. Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Council.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Mayor Krogh, and then Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to support the motion this morning, but I reserve the right to change my mind. I'm conscious of the fact that this is the Governance and Priorities Committee meeting, and that 3 members of Council were not able, for various good reasons, to attend this morning and add their voice to the debate. I want to pick up on a couple of comments that were made during the course of this morning's discussion, however. Reference was made to the culprit as fossil fuels. With great respect, the culprits are just that. It's every one of us in this room. And I don't want to sound all high-minded, but as Pogo so wisely said, we have met the enemy and he is us. Many people have come here this morning very passionate, very strong feelings about this, but I suspect the majority of you, with the exception, I believe, of Councillor Manley this morning, and I'm sure my old friend Bruni, got here in a gas-driven automobile. I don't think there's too many Teslas out there. And
Okay, we'll ask you to sit
good.
and allow.
We have
Mayor
4
Krogh to
more.
speak.
Excellent. Thank you. Well done. My point is this. We can continue to blame industries, but the truth is every one of us every day makes hundreds of decisions, and I mean literally hundreds. Do I use one of these? Do I walk when I could ride? Do I ride when I could walk? What sort of food do I consume? Do I consume exotic fruits out of season, shipped from around the world? All of those decisions. At the end of the day, this will make virtually zippy in terms of our fight against climate change. And I think we need to be honest and frank about that. We are essentially, with this motion, if it passes and Council brings in the bylaw eventually, we are shifting a small part of the problem away from the shoulders of all of us, unless some of you are going to be buying these new places. And I'm certainly not moving out of the house that Sharon and I have been in for 40 years. You're going to be shifting it on to another consumer, another purchaser down the road. That's what you're doing. That's really what we're doing. The added cost that will go with this building will be shifted to somebody else. The wisest words this morning came from someone who has been a political pain in my posterior through several elections, my old friend Bruni. And she said it very simply and very honestly, and it is the lesson that all of us have to take away from the long debate this morning and all the passion and all the words and all the articles and all the causes we pursue. And she said simply, quote, "We need to learn to consume less." No, I'm going to take over the chair's position.
You've been so good.
We don't either show appreciation or condemnation in this room. This is a meeting of council. This is not a public forum. So I want to close, as I say, repeating Bruni's words. We need to learn to consume less. When we do that, none of us will leave here ever again, or any meeting or any situation, if that's what we actually do, with the kind of guilt and the collective guilt and responsibility that each and one of us bear. But having finished the high-minded stuff, we're down to a practical motion. I'm going to support it today, but as I say, I look forward to hearing from the other members of council who didn't have an opportunity to be here, and we will no doubt hear from more members of the public how they feel about this, whether this makes sense for them, whether it is realistic, because candidly, if the result is we simply shift construction out of this community to some other community, I'm not sure that that's really what we're hoping to achieve here. Do we show leadership, or are we just shifting the problem? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. I am really appreciative to everyone who took the time to email council about this. We received, characterize it as an overwhelming amount of emails in support of moving in the direction of the zero carbon step code. And I really appreciate staff's work on this and all of the engagement with builders and community members and stakeholders, and working on ways to make this a feasible shift. And today I think we really heard from energy providers, engineers, builders, members of the community that this is not only feasible but highly desirable in our community. And as far as the, this solving climate change, like, I think every action that we take on this is worth it. The culprit here is inaction, and we have the opportunity to act now, and we know better than to drag our feet on this. And as far as shifting the cost onto another consumer or purchaser down the road, the alternative is shifting an unlivable planet onto future generations. So I think that's a no-brainer. So here now we have a chance to make a progressive decision, and I'm looking forward to supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Eastmere. I'll add my own comments, and I'll start by saying that I too will be supporting this motion. However, similar to Mayor Krogh, we certainly feel like the rest of council needs to be here. You need to hear from all of these people. So the future will, of course, is a bit up in the air as to how the final votes will go. However, I mean, who in their right mind isn't in favor of improving our land, air, and water? I mean, it makes absolute sense. My concern is it a reliable form to have, do we have enough reliability on our grid to be able to withstand the pressures of houses, cars, and all of the other things that come along? And I'll just say this, nothing personal. I was a bit disappointed about the presentation by Fortis. The speaker was excellent. I just felt that there could have been more information so that we could have gotten some of the answers that questions that from council. We didn't get that. I also was disappointed with the BC Hydro because I didn't feel as though it was, are we really going to be safe if we go completely electric? Having said that, the future will adapt. We certainly have over the years, and it will come. I am always of the belief that you try to have a carrot out there versus a stick. And I think that this will be very difficult for our construction community, and that concerns me because we need to get people into homes. And the faster we build homes, the more people will have a safe place to live. And that is, of course, our first priority at this table. Having said that, I do believe this is an important move, and I will be voting in favor, so I'll call the question now. All those in favor of the motion? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much, and thank you to our audience. It was great to have you, and I expect you to stay all day. No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. We have one more item on the agenda. Ms. Gurry, would you like to take us through, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So just really quickly, because you're in luck, our presenter was unable to come today and be here, Ms. Megan Wagoner. She's our Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy guru at the City of Nanaimo. And she was going to present today just on an update of our City of Nanaimo Privacy Management Program. So I won't go through the presentation today. It's in your package and it's available to the public. And I'll just briefly outline what she was going to speak to you about and the reason why it's coming forward. So we wanted to highlight the City of Nanaimo's Privacy Management Program and provide you an update based on the legislation changes that happened back in 2021 through the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Those updates provided provisions for the disclosure of personal information outside of Canada. It updated the Act to allow for that in certain circumstances. It permitted public bodies to charge a one-time application fee for non-personal FOI requests, which to date the City of Nanaimo has not done, and it would be, I believe, a 5-minute application fee, which would garner little money, but administratively might cause some issues, so that decision could come to council in the next year or so for you to decide if that's something you're interested in. The updates also required public bodies to implement a privacy management program, which includes the requirement for mandatory privacy impact assessments for all new and updated programs and initiatives, as well as mandatory privacy breach reporting. And this is the highlight which we really wanted to come and inform the public of, because with a lot of the initiatives the city is bringing forward, the modernization of digital cameras and data counters at intersections, the talk of smart city and enhancements in cyber security initiatives that we're trying to protect ourselves from. We're also trying to let the public know that we do take steps and measures to ensure we're protecting their privacy when these new initiatives come forward. So that can be something like CCTV cameras at our public facilities in downtown. We know that safety is a major issue and component for city facilities as well as businesses and everywhere. So we just want the public to be aware and council to be aware that we do take steps doing a privacy impact assessment to ensure that we're not breaching people's privacy, that we're protecting people's privacy. When you see a camera at an intersection, we are going through the privacy impact assessment process, which takes into consideration how we use personal information, should we collect it, if we are authorized to collect it, how we store it and secure it and provide and limit access to that information. So anytime we collect anybody's personal information, and as the city, we do have quite a bit of personal information we collect. We have property tax bills that we send out, so we collect personal information for homeowners, etc. So we do take steps, and we are mandated and legislated to protect that personal information. So we just want people to be very aware of that, and that we were actually ahead of the curve, because back in 2018, we started the privacy management program. So when the legislation changed, I know from going to a number of conferences that a number of municipalities are struggling to meet these requirements of the act and the changes, whereas we were ahead of the game. So we're actually very progressive when it comes to our privacy management program, our freedom of information practices. We have a very solid team, and I really commend Ms. Wagner and the team in Legislative Services for the work that they do. So other highlights of the legislative changes require or provided for increased penalties for offenses and the addition of new offenses for evading the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. That was good to see, because for somebody to intentionally and purposely break or breach the act, the consequences weren't very heavy in the past, so they're trying to add some more teeth to the legislation. And enabling more information sharing with Indigenous peoples, as well as adding Indigenous cultural protections. So those were some other changes to the act. So the city, like I said, we're very progressive. We have started this program back in 2018, and we provide staff education as well, and education for mayor and council, which will be coming to you soon, as well as cybersecurity training, which is very relevant and important right now, and is kind of a tie-in to ensure that you're cyber secure with all of those phishing emails and spam emails that you receive, and we try to protect you from, but the more education you can have, the better. And as well, this City of Nanaimo's Legislative Services Department, myself, and our IT department, the director from IT, and staff from each of our departments meet monthly to talk just about those things. So we have an internal committee that talks about privacy and security management. So that's another proactive and progressive step we're taking to ensure that we are not only thinking about protecting people's privacy, but we're actually taking steps to ensure that that's done. So if you have any questions about the report or the presentation, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry. Questions of council? Councillor Gesselbrook.
Thank you. Through you. Thanks for the report on this. It's definitely been something that's I'm hearing a bit of. Like, I think there's just increased increased mistrust in general from the public on how their information is being used. And I think in this age where there's like so much competition for airtime of who listens to who, I think as a local government, if we can really be proactive as this program shows of explaining how people's privacy are being protected and mentioning that, you know, we are taking steps to ensure that, and outlining as it is in this report, I think that's going to go a long way to build, you know, the fact that we can be trusted and we're here in the public interest. So thanks for the report.
Thank you, Mr. Gesselbrook. Mr. Councillor Gesselbrook, sorry about that. And there is no motion required. This is information only. Is that correct?
This is for information only, and
Okay.
I'll just add one more comment that Councillor Gesselbrook made me think of, and I'm sure Ms. Wagner would have mentioned it, but just in order to inform the public even more and make sure they're up to date, we are starting a page on our website that outlines all of this information and these steps as well. So if anybody ever has concerns about our program and about their privacy, they're free to contact us, but we'll also have that information available publicly.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Are there any questions, for the question period, are there any questions?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, there is. Thank you,
Yes.
Madam Chair. We have Dr. Nickerson. She wishes to talk about number 1, the zero carbon step code.
Dr. Mickelson? Has she gone?
Yes, it
It's
looks
possible
like
that she's gone. Okay, any other speakers? No? Thank you so much. Could I have a motion to adjourn? So moved by Councillor Gesselbrook, seconded. They're very quick here, Mayor Krogh seconded. All those in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much, Council.